All right, the season has started. Georgia practice starts today. Dean Legge, Ryan Curley. Ryan, it's been not a good offseason. Again, more trouble for the Dogs. But now they have the ability to focus on a regular season that's 4 weeks away. Clemson, 30 days away, whatever, however long that is. And, this is an important time. Fall practice always matters.
Yeah, look, you can win and lose a job in fall practice. We've seen that happen before. I think that it's still not, I guess, publicly stated, who's the starting secondary. I think that there's still some questions as to who that's going to end up being. Um, is their carryover from the spring, is it really Dominic Lovett, the true number one weapon in this offense that it seemed like he was gearing up to be during the spring and displayed at G Day? There's still questions, and like you said, two off seasons in a row now with off the field turmoil, just not good things. But like they did last year, you get a reset. Season starts in 30 days. I think that this team, I don't think there are that many questions for the
Okay.
team. There are questions, and like I mentioned, the secondary, but again, this is a well put together top to bottom roster that we know has depth at pretty much every spot. It's just, are they going to be as good as last year? Is that going to continue? I think that that's kind of the point that we're at. But for for Georgia, when you don't have a lot of question marks, you're just worried about yourself and getting better at each practice. I think that's the biggest thing is all the noises about Georgia being number one this year. And it kind of has been carrying over for the last 3 years. I think they just continue to block out everything and keep it in house. And it's on the table. This schedule is rougher than it has been, but nothing has changed in terms of how good this team is and what its chances are.
Well, they definitely. You said there weren't. What was the term? You said there were. There's not that many
I don't think there are
questions.
that many question marks with this team. Even if there are some new faces, it's a good roster.
Yeah. No, it's a good roster for sure. I mean, I think boy, I would say Ohio State maybe has a better roster or could have the same roster, and I think you could talk about Alabama and perhaps Texas. I'm not sure if that's what the semifinals will be or not, but that group there will have a lot to say in terms of who wins the national championship. For Georgia, I can't imagine. I mean, by the time everybody watching this, Ra Thomas might not be on the team. I can't imagine he'll play for Georgia again. So that playmaker is gone for Georgia. But one part that you were talking about was the secondary. But I think the thing about it is with your notion that there's not a lot of question marks. I heard about this not that long ago. Carson Beck is returning. Mike Bobo is returning. Kirby Smart is returning. A lot of the questions that you had coming into a season ago, they're gone now. Will Georgia want to have a three-peat? Well, no. I mean that's not going to happen this season. That's not even discussed. But when you look at Georgia versus everybody else, if you look at it just in that prism, Michigan head coach gone, Alabama head coach gone, Washington head coach gone, Texas brand new league. I mean, Ohio State and Georgia specifically are the only two coming into this season of the elite group, not Ole Miss, that don't have as many question marks. I would say that Ohio State has a ton of question marks, generally speaking. You got a new offensive coordinator, you have a new quarterback, you have, those are real problems. But we also have, Ryan, a lot going on in this 12-game playoff. This could be a really long season, and be a fun season too.
Yeah. Either way, it's a longer season, especially when you're Georgia and the expectation is that you're probably going to make a deep playoff run. It's going to be exhausting, especially when you just tack on the fact that your schedule's it's more difficult than what it's been, and that's kind of what it's going to be from now on. Maybe it's not as always as difficult as 2024, but there are going to be more challenges because they're just going to play more better teams from here on out. But even the thing about Georgia is you can even look at some of the areas where it's like, okay, are they going to be better here? Are they going to be worse here? And you think about it, this has been the case every year, right? In 2022, they had to replace a lot of the secondary, went on to be 15-0, won the national championship. Last year, like you said, for Ohio State, what they have to deal with this year is a little bit more similar to what Georgia had to deal with last year, a transition of coordinators and quarterbacks. And Georgia had the roster to win last year, and they ultimately didn't. I don't know if that is your sole reason, but they ultimately don't go on and do that. All of that is not happening this time around. And you got Carson Beck, who is now another year into being the starter. There's a reason why everyone's projecting him in this offense to be so good. They don't have as many moving pieces as they did last year, even with the Ra Thomas thing. Because, like you said, it'd be surprising if he plays for Georgia again. He wasn't this big part of disappointing. I don't know if is the right word for last year, but what 300 yards and 30 is cash. I don't remember his exact numbers, but that was about it, and one touchdown. So it's not like he came in and made some huge impact. And I think that subtracting him from the equation doesn't really change things. They have plenty of weapons outside.
Yeah, I mean, the Rara ended last season with 23 receptions for 383 yards. He didn't play after the Tennessee game.
Yeah.
So there, what was the Rara game? It was Kentucky. He had 5 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown. That was his only touchdown of the season. I mean, you'd rather have him than not, but you cannot have him. I mean, it's not an acceptable. You cannot act like that. It's not acceptable. So,
the biggest thing you're losing in Rara is a guy that's been in the league for a few years, and
right.
and you lose that experience. But they went out and they recruited Kobe Young, and that's a guy that's likely going to play in that spot outside. And I thought they showed immediate chemistry between him and Carson Beck at G-Day. So they're not hurting too much with that. And obviously we don't know the full extent of that situation, but it's a loaded offense.
It is. Well, that's why I wanted to talk about just for a second because, this is a team that, there are guys everywhere. It's not like there aren't guys everywhere. I mean, a season ago, Kobe Young in the ACC had 5 touchdowns, 500 yards, 47 receptions. That's very productive. That's just all there is to it. I mean, you're going to have to replace at this stage Ladd, Brock, and Ra, and it's probably in the order of Brock, Ladd, then Ra. So, the top 2 are going to be challenging to replace. But when you start talking about Stanford tight end transferring in, is he going to start? I don't know. I literally don't know if he's going to start. It's a good question because you have some guys with some very real experience at tight end already. At receiver, you have Jackson, you have Young, you've got Dylan Bell is the person to me that could have the explosive season. Go ahead.
Well, it's the versatility with him. They can use him in all sorts of different ways. I don't think that there's really a limit to outside of tight end and offensive line as to where you could put him. They showed that they trust him throwing the ball on a trick play. So they've got that. That's something that Georgia's had also for years now is just versatility in the type of weapons that they have. And that's what when you look at Georgia. No, there's not a Brock Bowers, and they're just not going to have someone as impactful as him, right? We know that. But they still have all sorts of different types of guys. And there's even, and I don't like bringing him up because I feel like it's been 4 off seasons in a row where we've been talking about an Arian Smith breakout, but you still have an Arian Smith that can beat you down the field. The thing too with these transfers, right? Dominic Lovett came in and was impactful immediately as a transfer. These guys are coming from worse situations, and then they get implanted into an offense that has likely the best line and likely the best quarterback in the sport. So I just think it's a smooth transition for those transfers too, but it's not an offense that's hurting.
I think this time of year. I mean, you're going to get a lot of coach speak from Kirby. We're going to see what happens in 2 weeks when they scrimmage, and then the week after that, and then of course they'll have Clemson soon thereafter. I've not looked lately, but I'm sure Georgia's still about a 2-touchdown favorite over Clemson. I mean, think about that, Ryan. I mean, just for a moment here, the Clemson game is sorry, I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's a complete afterthought. When we were in Dallas, no one was talking about it. I mean, Carson Beck had to remind people, well, yeah, we're playing Clemson. Clemson's going to be ranked coming into this game.
Yeah, and they're going to boast one of the best defenses in college football, most likely. That just shows you how much there's going on in college football and how much is going on in the league. There's so many moving pieces. There's so much new this year. And yeah, they're going to have to deal with a formidable opponent in Clemson, regardless of how I feel about that game, which I think it's not going to be a close game. It's still a legitimate opponent, and it's one of the best teams on their schedule. And sometimes teams aren't awake in that first week, and teams are different. We saw Alabama, how different they were last year in September and December. Completely different. And that could happen for Georgia, that could happen for Clemson, but in the moment you can't ignore each and every week. And it is Clemson is an afterthought right now.
But I just wanted to say that I mean it is shocking that they're so much of an afterthought. Now that may be the case because of we're a month away. That may I don't know why, but this is not the game that this is not going to be a top 10 matchup. This is maybe could be number one versus number. I don't think. I mean, is Clemson going
Like
to be below
15-ish,
17?
20-ish.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not going to be a lot
It's
below
the best
20.
ranked matchup of the first weekend, right?
Is it the only ranked one?
I think it might be.
It's one of the few. I mean, we
It's
don't
one of the very
know.
few.
Like,
I don't know about. I don't think there are any ranked matchups in week 0. But
is Texas A&M going to be ranked? I mean, like,
why would they be ranked? Is like is that,
I
why
don't
have
I
they
don't
been
I don't
ranked?
know. I
Why
mean,
have
I
they
don't
been
know.
preseason ranked these past 5 years? I've like
I don't. It's so we don't know what the rankings are right now. That's one problem. I mean, Georgia, Clemson,
have
those
the
it's going to
actual
be a matchup
rankings
of
for the
ranked teams
season.
for sure. Penn State, West Virginia, in theory, could be a ranked matchup between the two, but like, there's no marquee game. I mean, LSU and SC could both be ranked, I would imagine. Um, but there's not a lot of great here at all, and that's a few years ago, Texas A&M and Notre Dame is probably the biggest game of the weekend. Um, I don't know. I mean, Georgia Clemson. The problem is, Ryan, they're not the Clemson. They've not been the Clemson of what they were for a half a decade now, and there could it's great to have that reference point. I think for Kirby and them because they can say, no, you're dealing with Clemson. We know what that was like in 21. We know what like but there's been I don't know 40 games since 21. Clemson hasn't been what they were in 20 in a long time, and so the public's not necessarily fooled, and Las Vegas is not. But he has certainly the ability to if you want to call it fooling his players. The problem if you're Georgia is not the Clemson game specifically unless you lose it. The problem is everything that comes after that. I mean, there's just so this is going to be a really you called it exhausting. This is going to be a very challenging season. You have a long season, and then you have a 12 game playoff after that, which is going to have 11 total games in it. Now you're not playing all 11 games, but you know, 4 playoff games in one weekend. Well, in two, there will be 4 playoff. There will be 4 playoff game weekends. There will be 2 of those. The college football junkie will get all they need. It's going to be
Oh, put it in me, man. Put it
no.
in
I
my
know,
face.
I know,
Like
I know you want the IV, but this is just going to be very different. That's all.
yeah, it's that. I mean, you answered the question. The reason why the Clemson game is kind of the afterthought is because how much is going to happen afterwards,
Right.
and by the time we get to that, it's going to feel like that was such a long time ago. Um, it's gearing up to be one of the most memorable Georgia seasons ever, regardless of the result, right? I mean, we're going to look back and say, wow, like they had to do that and they dealt with that. Okay, they made the playoff and then this was different. There might be a playoff game in Athens. That's a total possibility. I would say, well, I don't know if likely is the right way to put it, but that's one of the most likely things that happens to Georgia this year is having a home playoff game in Athens. The Georgia Tech games on a Friday night. There's just a ton of new, and there's so many different things to talk about. The things that are getting focused on the most is Texas and Alabama, but it goes to show just how eventful the next 5-6 months are going to be.
It'll be like this, Ryan. They play Georgia Tech, Auburn, and the Gators, who they always play. They play their 3 rivals. Then they also play Tennessee, Clemson, Alabama, and Texas. That's 8 like legit like people are going to be interested games, either their rivalries or their big name. That does not include at Ole Miss, which will be in theory, we don't know, a top 10 game. So
It doesn't include
exhausting.
at Kentucky, which could be a ranked road game as well.
The Kentucky game at night is one of the most.
I forgot it was at night.
Yeah, it's a. We'll talk about that more over time. People don't. Most Georgia fans don't go to the games. They don't know. They're not there for it. And so, like, when you're talking about not real good Kentucky at night, or excuse me, not real good Kentucky at noon, yeah, that produces things like the 2004 beating or 2014. Not not that bad. Kentucky at night produces 1996. They win at Commonwealth. The last time we were in Kentucky, which was not a night game even, and it was a
It was
disaster.
freezing.
Yeah, it was horrific. You think about 2016, where Georgia had to win it on the last play of the game. These are all games that were played at Commonwealth. No one will remember the Kentucky game as soon as that game's over. If Georgia wins, no one will remember that game at all. I'm just saying, in 18, that was for the East. 20, that Georgia didn't play well, and they just, it's just everybody is going to be focused on those sort of big three games, and they're all on the road. And then you've got the rivalry games, which are all in Athens somehow. Oh, well, no, well, two of the three are. And then, so it's but this is going to be an exhausting season, exhausting in a good way. Thanks for watching.